Hello, everyone, and thank you. Coming to 50 is Fabulous, Strategies for Overcoming Ageism in the Job Search. My name is Marcia Wall, and I am a career coach of 6+ years. My first job was actually about 20 years ago at a school in New Orleans, but my first real job as a career coach was at Jewish Family Service in San Diego starting in 2016. And we had a program there on aging and wellness. And so I served a lot of folks who were 50+. And that's where I really got started working with that age group. And full disclosure, I'm 50+. And so I understand a lot of the concerns that people are facing. And over the years, I've coached hundreds of people to be able to achieve their academic goals, their volunteer goals, and of course, their career goals as well. So let's just go ahead and get started. Oops, did I stop sharing? Well, that's probably showing my age. There we go. There we go. Okay, thanks. As I said, my name is Marcia. You can find me on LinkedIn. I also encourage you to read my newsletter called Joyful Journeys. Some of the people in this workshop tonight are featured there. And those are stories of clients that I've worked with who've sort of gone on to be able to do great things in their career. So be sure to check that out. And tonight we are going to follow this agenda. We are going to talk about ageism in your career, kind of an overview. What does it look like? How does it manifest? We're going to talk about some beliefs, facts, myths, and reality, because sometimes when we're job searching or thinking about our careers, we let fantasy rather than fact take over, and that can be a hindrance. But mostly we're going to talk about strategies tonight. What can you do in order to optimize not only your job search, but your career in general, how to think about your career advancement. First off, everyone knows that discrimination is against the law, but it's only in most cases, right? First of all, you have to work for an employer that has at least 20 employees. If you're working for an employer with fewer than 20 employees, you're not protected against age discrimination if you're 40 years or older. Also, certain jobs like air traffic controller, working in the FBI, there are other jobs where there are age limits to that. So just go ahead and know that. Having said that, although age discrimination is illegal, it's often hard to prove and it's hard to combat on an individual basis. ARP does a lot, as well as some other organizations, to bring lawsuits and to take legal action and to do policy work to deal with this situation. But I will say, if you know for a fact that you were discriminated against because of your age, you really might want to consider talking to somebody about that. I had someone tell me that they were told that they didn't get hired because they went with a younger candidate, that was the reason. And if that were me, I would have maybe found someone to talk about that. Question though is, what is ageism and what does it look like in your career? I encourage you, one or two people want to raise their hand or come off mic and share their own experiences with how ageism has affected their career, their job search. Anyone feel brave enough to come off mic? Well, I can tell you. Oh, Claire, please go ahead.
I noticed that there are now, I've been looking for work for a long time, and I noticed there are now some positions that will say they're looking for a young college grad as the introduction to the position details. So that to me is a form of ageism. I don't know if that is ageism, but that discourages me immediately.
Yeah, it can manifest itself in a lot of ways. If you hear the term being a digital native, that can also be a cue that someone might be looking to discriminate in some kind of way. If people say that they're only looking for someone with so many years of experience, that might also be an indication that they're looking for someone who's younger, if they're equating that with the beginning of their career. Anyone else have other ideas about what ageism looks like, or how it manifests in your career? Murray, feel free to. Murray is, by the way, a fantastic job coach and career services provider. He's a colleague, and I'm going to be inviting him at all times. And I know there's other career service providers on here too. If you ever want to chime in, I absolutely welcome your expertise. I know for me, some of the things that will sort of put me off sometimes is if I see an ad that says, must be comfortable working long hours or a fast-paced environment. That doesn't mean that someone over 50 can't do that, but as we all know, that may be an indication that that they're really looking for someone, younger, who's maybe doesn't have responsibilities yet to family or to taking care of parents or even children. And so that might be an indication that they're really looking for someone like that. Marion, what do you think?
I saw an ad that looked really interesting until it said, "We're a really dope environment. We're a really dope office. If you like to have fun." That just was like, oh, okay, that's not an environment for me.
So tell me more about that, Marion.
It did follow fast-paced environment. If you like to wear multiple hats, if you can pivot often, very high stress, high reward, but we're a very dope environment.
You drink out of this, and so I don't want to drink out of it.
And it just really, to me, that screamed, younger person. They're not really looking to be inclusive. You just have to run with them. And
okay,
it seemed really high stress to me.
Maybe using some lingo, some lingo that didn't feel age inclusive. Thank you for sharing, Marion. I appreciate it. If you are not coming off mic to make a comment, if you would please go ahead and mute yourself now. That would be wonderful. Thank you very much. Lisa, what would you like to say?
It's hard to, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
It's hard to discern sometimes, there've been at least one interview where there were two younger people that were interviewing me at the same time. And I could kind of see their reaction when the Zoom screen, when we connected. But my comment was that I noticed sometimes I'll go look at companies, I'll go look at their Glassdoor, or I'll go to their website and take a look at their gallery. And you look at the pictures and you see a diverse group, but then you don't see anybody that may have gray hair or may appear to be closer to your age. It's diverse, yep, but not diverse age-wise.
Right. Thank you for sharing, Lisa. I think you're right that sometimes there may not be anything explicit in the job description, but when you get to the interview, there may be a shell shock on someone's face. I actually had an interview once and someone asked, if I felt that at my age I could keep up with them at the office. And so that was my first clue to know that it wasn't going to be a good fit for me. Marion, I'm assuming you still have your hand raised from before, is that right? Okay. All right. So I think the bottom line is that ageism can look like a lot of different things. Murray, please.
I'm sure you're going to cover this later, but yeah, you can look for other clues too. There are some companies that actually have a generations employee resource group. So you can look, or you'll see on their website that they have signed the AARP pledge. And you often, if you're truly interested in the position, you don't necessarily have to say, hey, I'm feeling like I'm going to just be blown out of the water. They're not even going to call me for an interview. I have a 76-year-old client who started yesterday at a financial services firm, and he was able to secure the job, showing how he is not only his value add, but also how he is competitive, what his passion was. And it was at a firm that had the AARP pledge.
Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about it. And thank you for bringing that up, and remind me to remind everyone else about that later. There are ways in which employees, or employers, I should say, are going out of their way, as they should, to let people know that it's an inclusive environment. The bottom line is that ageism is real and it exists. And I actually read this on the plane on Friday, I think it was, about AARP survey in their magazine, and 78% of workers have witnessed or experienced age discrimination. So that's basically everybody. So if you feel like you've experienced it, in all likelihood you have. But let's take a look at some facts and beliefs around ageism, right? We said it exists. It actually exists for all ages. There will be people who will tell you that they are discriminated against because they're too young, or they look too young, or people say they don't have the right experience. And also remember that you were once the 25-year-old that mature workers feared. So if you're feeling like, things aren't fair, believe you me, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, someone was feeling that same way. And bias is often unconscious. It's not that people set out necessarily to say, you know what, we don't want older people here, they don't have a value, but they simply may not take it into consideration in their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. It may be that they, again, have that shell shock deer in the headlights look when they start interviewing someone who looks like their grandfather. But the good news is that you can combat ageism in your job search and in your career. Now, the thing that gets in the way sometimes is not other people, sometimes it's ourselves. I've had clients come to me at age 35 and ask if they were too old to reinvent themselves. And the answer is absolutely not. I think that if you're dead, it's too late to reinvent yourself. But if you're breathing and you're alive, I think you stand a chance to be able to do something new with your life. People think they have to lie or downplay their education to be competitive. We'll talk more about that later. I don't believe in lying. I don't believe in, I don't think there's anything as too much education. And sometimes people believe that younger people don't value older workers. We can come in as older folks sometimes and make assumptions about younger people in the workplace and be ageist against them in some ways, maybe in an unconscious way. The other thing too is that people, not everyone certainly, and hopefully not anyone in this group, but sometimes believe that ageism is the primary reason they're not getting a job. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. Ageism is real, and we can do as much as we want as a society to try and overcome that, but I will never sit here and say that it's all in your head, because it's absolutely not. So we're going to look at some strategies today that you can use to combat that. Oops, let's just go ahead and get right to this, because I think we've talked about the myths a little bit already. What you want to do is focus on what you can control. Again, as a society, we can work towards diversity, equity, inclusion in terms of age and other factors as well. But right here, right now, you can only focus on what you can control. And first of all, it's having a positive attitude. I will tell you that my clients who succeed, no matter what age they are the ones who have a growth mindset, who are willing to take risks, who are willing to be different, do different things, and have an open mind. Those are the ones that are going to succeed no matter what. This is a big one, remaining relevant. And what does that mean? We'll talk more about that later. But if you're not relevant, it doesn't matter what age you are. You could have someone who's 25 and who's not relevant, they're going to be passed over. But if you make a commitment to staying relevant, then you are going to up your chances of doing well in the job search. And then it's about taking action. It's about willing to make those changes and put yourself on the line and do the hard work of career change in order to move forward. So, big surprise, newsflash, networking is the key to career advancement. I don't care what age you are. And a lot of people don't like to hear the word network. So I have a lot of other names for it: expanding your professional circle, making professional friends, finding your professional tribe, and quite frankly, just meeting new people. It's by building relationships over a long term that you are going to be able to not only find your next job, but really enhance your career over the long term. And that's the goal when I work with my clients. It's not just to help them to find a job. It's really to teach them the skills that they need to be owners of their careers over a lifetime, and to have the knowledge, skills, abilities, and confidence to be able to navigate their careers no matter what may come in their path. So what does networking look like? Obviously on LinkedIn, that's big, everyone's doing that, but there are other social media platforms like YouTube and Twitter. Some people are even using TikTok. Guilty, I'm not doing that. But Facebook still remains relevant for a lot of networking efforts. I know I use it for that. One of the networking tools that is often overlooked is volunteering. I will tell you that my career has been fueled by volunteerism, and that has allowed me to find new jobs, to make new connections, to develop new skills, put new things on my resume, and also to be personally fulfilled. Going to conferences, attending meetups, being a guest speaker somewhere, offering to be a mentor to someone else. People think of networking, they hear give and take and they think it's all about taking. And that's why they don't want to network, because they don't want to ask people for things. But if you are someone who can offer something to someone else, then people are going to want to connect with you. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. It might just be, hey, I'm willing to speak with someone for 15 to 20 minutes to tell them about my own career. And that is enough to sort of get the conversation started. Lisa has dropped in the chat an example of networking on LinkedIn. Absolutely, check her out. If you guys have other ideas about networking, please feel free to drop that in the chat as well. The bottom line is that you need to be able to connect with people. And this is a big one, networking is important, but don't network in an echo chamber. What do I mean by that? Don't just join with people who are only in your same industry or who are the exact same position that you are. We talk about diversity. Well, when you're networking, you need a diverse range of people in your network. And that super means avoid negative people. Not everyone who is job searching has a growth mindset. And if you are networking with people that are reinforcing that this is too difficult, that they are only not receiving offers because of their age or some other status, then those aren't going to be people who can cheer you on. So you want to be a champion for other people, and you want to network with other champions. Any thoughts on that right now? You can drop them in the chat. Feel free to come off mute, or someone's asking, what is a job club? We're going to get to that towards the end. That's a great question, Donna. That's a great question. All right, so let's get back to the presentation, and we want to talk about what it means to be digitally relevant. It's a digital world. A LinkedIn profile is a must. Having some sort of other digital representation of yourself online, whether that's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, there's all sorts of profiles, all sorts of social media platforms out there. But if someone can't find you online in this day and age, they're going to question if you have something to hide. They're going to subconsciously think, why do they not have a digital footprint? How do you create a digital footprint? You can write blogs, create newsletters. By the way, you can do that for free on LinkedIn. Some people are into creating podcasts, maybe having a YouTube channel, creating videos for people to watch. Here's the thing, you don't have to instantly overnight become a social media maven or become, the next digital queen in the universe, but it is important that you start incorporating digital relevance into your job search and career advancement strategy. That could mean getting your own website. Something really simple is adding links in your resume. If there's a project that you worked on that you're really proud of and you're listing that as an accomplishment in your resume, put a link in the resume that people can click on to get more information about that. I've even seen people do a video cover letter or thank you note as opposed to writing it out. And what that shows people is that you're innovative, that you're cutting edge. And since most people aren't doing that, you are really going to stand out to whoever the hiring manager is. Anyone else have any other ideas about what it might take to stay digitally relevant or what that looks like? Murray, do you have any thoughts?
Part of that is even what you're doing on LinkedIn, just by not just liking somebody's comment, but responding to it because the algorithm likes it. But when you're responding on LinkedIn, recruiters go, oh, you must be digitally relevant. So
yeah, and I think you bring up
it could
be one sentence. You're right. And I think you bring up a good point. Having the profile is not enough. You have to use it. So if you just have a profile, no one's really going to take a look at it. But if you're interviewing, if you're interacting, if you're posting, if you're creating content, if you're joining groups, that's how you're going to become relevant, and recruiters are going to see that. So I think that's a really good point, Murray.
And the other thing is that even though LinkedIn's kind of tried to tamp it down, a good 10 to 20% of people in groups have been recruiters.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right about that. Here's the other thing too, right? You need to network. That has to be fundamental. You need to have a digital presence in the world, but you also have to make sure that you're looking for the right type of company. And I think, Murray, you alluded to this. ARP has the employer pledge. These are organizations and companies that have signed on that they are friendly to older workers. You can also look at best places to work for people over 50 or older works list. And also, as Marion alluded to, looking for clues in the job postings. They want someone who is dope. If you feel that you're dope and you're over 50, by all means apply. I know for me that might, set me off a little bit or kind of put me off. But look for clues that, I wouldn't say don't apply for something just because it says that, but consider that. Murray, what do you say?
Well, actually, I was looking further down when you were talking about asking questions in the interview. One of the advantages of networking is being able to ask questions before the interview, so you can ascertain what the organization's culture is and is it welcoming, and do employees over 50 feel like they belong. And you can do that through LinkedIn, and I'm sure you're going to cover some of this about how you go about it. And you can look at employee resource groups, and even if there isn't a generations or an age employee resource group within the company, and they're tasked for recruiting, the groups are also include groups for women, groups for parents, groups for beyond just race and LGBTQ plus, et cetera. So it's a way to really get a sense of what the company's culture is.
No, absolutely. And Murray, for those people who don't know what an employee resource group is, would you explain?
Companies 20, 30 years ago started forming groups for just around an affinity. And they were mostly for Blacks, people, Latinos, Asians, people with disabilities, and then women, and then they expanded to all other areas. And what they were doing originally was just to be supportive of each other, but now they've often become business resource groups. So they not only serve the needs of their constituency, but they're there for recruiting. They're there to help ensure that the business is relevant to the constituency of that group.
No, I think you're absolutely right about that. And I'm glad you brought that up. And that actually leads me a little bit back to networking, is that one of the things that you can do, and we'll discuss this later on, is join networking groups either online or through professional organizations that are dedicated to this issue, or that are concerned about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Find support through those groups, and they can give you a lot of information about which organizations might be friendly to older workers or not. So let's go ahead on and continue the conversation. This is a big one. People ask me all the time, how do you make your resume appropriate in this day and age? And so I've titled it Anti-Aging Resume Guidelines. And that's really a misnomer, because what I'm going to be talking about are guidelines that everyone should be following in order to optimize their resumes. And I really want to emphasize the word guideline. People ask me all the time, what's the best way to write a resume? And my answer is always by using critical thinking skills. A resume, like any other written material, is going to require you to think critically, to consider who your audience is, to consider what information you need to include or exclude in order for it to be effective. So we're going to go through about 10 different guidelines. It's up to you whether or not to follow them, to think critically about how they might apply in your unique situation. first one, though, I think is pretty standard, to omit graduation dates from your resume. I recommend that and if anyone disagrees, they're welcome to disagree, but in my opinion, it's not really relevant when you graduated, as long as that you have the degree or the certificate or whatever your education might be. And the only time I suggest an exception to that, if someone has just finished college, perhaps, or just finished a certificate, and they want to let people know that it's recent because that may be their biggest professional accomplishment to date. Or in the case, I did have a mature worker that I worked with, and she had just finished college, and she wanted to let people know that she had graduated recently, because that showed that she was relevant and up to date with the times. But in general, I think you can leave that off. Definitely leave off objective sections. Back in the day, people would have an objective section to let employers know what they were looking for. And these days, what you really want to have is a summary section or a career profile that positions or lets people know what your value is in the workplace. Now, full disclosure, we're not going to do like hardcore resume critiquing, right? These are sort of headlines or overall considerations that we're going to talk about today. This is another one: leave off your home address. Does anyone know why we used to have the home address on the resume? Well, I'll tell you, and that's because we used to mail things. Mail, right?
Yes.
Get things in the mail, and so the home address was necessary. And so if you have your home address on your resume, that is an indication to someone that you may not be up to date. And that doesn't have anything to do with your age. It's a matter of, are you up to date? I've seen resumes from 25-year-olds that have the home address on there because that's what they think is most appropriate. But you don't want your home address on there for a lot of reasons, including identity theft. You're already going to be giving people enough information on your resume. You don't need to tell them where they can find you on a Friday night. This next one is a little controversial. I say delete experience dating back more than 10 to 15 years. And then I immediately say if that's relevant for your particular situation. In general, you don't need to go back more than 10, 15, 20 years on your experience. Certainly you don't want to, in most cases, you don't want to list the exact dates of where you worked and when you worked. Now, having said that, I go back more than 15 years on my own resume. I may only highlight the career coaching things I've done over the last 6 to 8 years, but I will put in what's called an early career section to let people know that I used to be a professor, because I think the work that I did as a professor is really relevant to the work that I do in coaching. And having been a writing professor, I want to let people know that I knew how to teach other people how to write. So surely I can write a resume and teach other people to do the same. So again, these are all guidelines. You definitely want to use an up-to-date, easy to read format. You want to have a lot of white space on there. You want to make sure that you have things bolded in different sections so that the information is easy to find. That's what recruiters are looking for when they look at a resume. They want to find the most relevant information in a very timely manner. Different research out there using different numbers, but on average, hiring managers and recruiters will look at a resume for about 6 to 10 seconds before they make a subconscious decision about whether they're interested in continuing to read. Whew, there's a lot going on here. This is a huge one. Highlight attention-grabbing accomplishments. People want to know what you've done, not what you were responsible for doing. Too often, and again, I see this across the ages, people will write on their resume that they were responsible for XYZ. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I was responsible for taking the dog for a walk every day, but that doesn't mean that I did it. And so if I were writing a resume about my childhood experience and said that I was responsible for walking the dog, that sounds great. If I had to list my accomplishments, I'd have to lie in order to make it look good. So what you want to do is focus on accomplishments where you can talk about achievements, maybe programs that you've created, processes that you have implemented. If you have anything quantifiable, maybe if you've increased sales, 20% year over year, but you definitely want to focus on accomplishments. And this is huge. The next one, showcase relevant tech skills and upskilling efforts. Doesn't matter what age you are, people want to make sure that you're tech savvy. Now, again, full disclosure, I'm a little bit of a Luddite. I am not the most tech savvy person on the planet, but when I apply for jobs, which obviously I haven't done in a long time, but when I have, I've made sure that I'm at least tech savvy enough for the job for which I'm applying. So if you have those tech skills, you want to showcase those, and you want to make sure that you're including current relevant keywords and terminology. You can find those in the job description. If you're really up on your industry, then you are going to know what sort of the buzzwords or the terminology is in your industry. And you want to make sure that those are on there because, again, you want to be relevant. Any questions so far? I know we've got some in the chat, and I'll be sure to get to those when we get to the end. Okay, then we will go on to next thing, NICS. NICS words like seasoned, veteran, or 20 plus years of experience. If you are trying to showcase your skills, talents, and abilities and accomplishments, do that. It doesn't really matter how many years of experience you have unless it specifically says in the job description, we're looking for someone maybe with 10 plus years of experience. Because I don't know about you, but I don't care how many years of experience maybe my dentist has, so long as he or she or they are able to clean my teeth and do the job. I just want to make sure that they have the skills. Now, does that mean that experience is irrelevant? Absolutely not. But if you lead with the fact that you are seasoned, which, by the way, that sounds like a Cajun blackened fish, then you're letting people know right away that that's how you're identifying yourself as being older, when really you should be identifying yourself as a relevant, current, professional in your field. Another clue to people, if you're relevant or not, is if you're using like Times Roman, for example, that's not considered a relevant font. Now, does that mean that it's a deal breaker for someone who's interested in you? No. Everything that we're talking about here, these are all small things that add up. And so you want to pay attention to the small details so that when people look at the big picture, what they see is you, and again, that you're relevant and up to date. I have included with this presentation, after this presentation, you're going to get a list of resources a mile long, and it's going to include a list of which fonts maybe are the best for this day and age and which ones you should leave off. Speaking about being up to date, your email address, if you are using Yahoo, AOL, or Hotmail, you're going to be considered outdated. Is it fair? Is it right? Or is it wrong? I don't know. It just is. So having a Gmail account is a pretty safe bet. And also, of course, make sure that your email address is professional. I used to hire teachers for a college where I worked, and if their email addresses were not professional, and I won't say what they were, then that was a clue to me that they may not be professional as well. This is a biggie. Automatically cut out references available upon request at the end of your resume. We assume that you have those, and if you don't, when we get to hire you, then we're not going to hire you if you don't have references to share. It takes up space, and you certainly don't want to include the personal information of your references on your actual application or on your actual resume. Next one, keep it brief. 1 or 2 pages should suffice. Does that mean that a longer resume won't get you hired? No, I had a client who came to me with a resume that was 5 pages, and I asked her about it, and she said, well, I'm getting interviews constantly. I said, great, then keep it. So again, these are guidelines, but usually in 1 or 2 pages, maybe 3, you should be able to communicate what you can bring to the table. And the truth of the matter is that when people look at your resume, they're going to make an unconscious decision within the top 4th of your resume anyway. And so there's probably nothing on the 3rd page that is going to convince them to be interested in you for an interview, if they didn't find it in the first 2 pages anyway. All right, how are we doing so far, folks? I know we've got some questions in the chat. Again, we'll get to those at the end. Anyone want to come off mute right now and let us know what you're thinking?
Well, I thank you, Marcia, for this opportunity. I think that some of the items that you mentioned, as I think of how resumes have changed over the years, and as I come across some people, since I work in social services and sometimes I will ask my clients as I help them to search for employment, I ask them, do they have a resume? And they will bring me what we'll say today, traditional resume with everything in it that you just said maybe should or should not be in it. And I'll look back over probably 5 or 6 years ago and thought my resume was relevant. And when it was redone, I thought, oh my gosh, how outdated am I? Oh, wow. And so then obviously I offer that information to others now. But I really think as we go through this and as you share this, one of the areas where I fall short and I struggle with is not necessarily technology in general, but putting time into something like LinkedIn. It's a constant. I finally put it on my phone. I don't keep social media on my phone, period, because it just distracts me. It doesn't take much to distract me anyway. So I finally put LinkedIn there, and in putting it there, it's the reminder to check it, to look at it, and to update it. And that came from you, so I thank you for that. But I really appreciate this list.
Oh, you're very welcome. And full disclosure, the way that I write a resume today is not the same way that I wrote it a year ago, and it's not the same way that I wrote it 5 years ago. The resume that I used to get my job as a career services provider for Jewish Family Service in San Diego is not a resume that I would recommend anyone write today. And so, don't feel bad. And I'm saying this to everybody who's listening to this presentation. Don't feel bad like, oh, the career coach, she knows everything. She's, got this together. No, I'm updating all the time. I'm always learning. That trick about putting in a link to a project on your resume, I think I learned that about 2 months ago from another career services provider. And I was like, wow, why didn't I think of that? That's so basic, but that's something that we can do to stay updated. So it's not just a matter of updating your resume or updating your LinkedIn profile, but it's staying up to date and current and being a curious, ongoing learner so that as you're moving forward, you're able to navigate changes as they come along. Now, having said that, the resume is not enough. Cover letter, that's pretty standard. Even LinkedIn is pretty standard right now, but there are other things, other documents that you can use to market your skills, knowledge, talents, and abilities. I think everyone should have a diversity statement ready to go, maybe to submit along with a cover letter and a resume, or maybe have a link to that on their LinkedIn profile, because diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, right? These are all really important topics in this day and age. And really, they've been important probably since, the beginning of time, but thankfully we're now prioritizing these issues. I won't get into too much about what a career walking deck is, but you can create one. Basically, it is a PowerPoint that gives the highlights of your career, showcases some of your accomplishments, and it's just a different way to, again, show the value that you can contribute in the marketplace. Having a portfolio, there are companies, there's one called Win the View, and you can sign up with them to create an online portfolio. You can create one for yourself, maybe using Google, for example. There's lots of ways to have an online portfolio. But here's the thing, if you have one and you're putting it on your LinkedIn profile or in your resume or whatever, and someone else isn't, then you kind of have a leg up on them and you're showing that you're digitally relevant. Lisa, what would you like to add?
Now, 2 things. Are you going to address, because sometimes you go to apply and you go through the electronic application and you get to those pesky fields that you have to fill in. Well, they will ask for the years or the dates and you can't get around it. Now, I want to address that, but also my second thing is, could you repeat that the digital portfolio website that you mentioned?
Yeah, one is called Win the View, and I'm not necessarily endorsing that site. That's one that I happen to know, quite a bit about, but I think there's also ways for people to create their own online portfolios.
Yeah,
and
I use
so
WordPress, so yeah.
Okay, right. And so a portfolio may be a website that has links to projects that you've done. It may have your resume. It may have you recording yourself and, telling people kind of what your elevator pitch is. But again, if there's something that you can show people online, you're going to look relevant. And as far as filling in those pesky job applications, I'm right there with you. They're no fun. And if something's required to fill in, then you have to fill it in. And, you know, is that fair? Is that right? I'm not here to really debate that. If it is what it is. And so what you can control are those career marketing documents that you can create. You can control how you're networking. You can control researching companies before you go into them. So Lisa, I don't know that that's totally avoidable, but I think that you can mitigate the potential risk from that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Believe it or not, we are actually getting towards the end, but Murray, you want something to contribute? I want to hear it.
Well, one of the things, even if you're filling out that online application, because motion filled by, or people are called to an interview by somebody that they know. In networking, you end up connecting with somebody that the company knows. And so your resume is going to be circulated no matter what you filled in on the application process. So also look at your career marketing documents as just part of your networking tools.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. The resume and career walking deck and all this other stuff that I'm talking about, it's not just for applying for jobs, but it's also, you know, materials that you want to share in your networking efforts. When you're in the actual interview, we'll get to the first thing last. Prepare for current interview formats and questions, and those are going to be behavioral questions. I have a link in the documents that I'm sending you to resources that can help prepare you to do that. You definitely want to focus on words such as team, collaborate, collective success, because what can happen, and this is really true of any age, but if there's a younger person who might feel threatened by your experience, and even if not, you don't want to go in there talking about I. You want to talk about we, and what we are going to do together. And if you focus on that, then people are going to see that you're ready to join the team, that you're ready to be a part of something. And if they erroneously are thinking that you think you know it all because you're older, right? And we know that we don't think that. But if someone is erroneously thinking that, by you talking about working as a team, they're going to see that, you know, you're ready to be a member of a team. What I have said in interviews in the past is that, you know, I'm really looking forward to joining the team. I feel like I bring a lot to the table, but I also know that I don't know everything and that other people have other expertise to offer. And I'm really looking forward to contributing, but also to learning and growing both as an individual, as an employee, so that I can contribute to our collective mission and success. And that has always gone over really well. You can ask revealing questions if you want to. I always like to ask, you know, what is your management style, or what are you looking for in an employee? And that will give you some idea of who the person is. And you might also ask about, you know, tell me about what diversity, equity, inclusion looks like in this organization. Do they bring up age or do they not? And here's a big one: avoid phrases, words, and topics that age you. And we do it all the time. We might say, and I'm guilty of it. I think I even did it in this presentation by saying back in the day, or in my day, or the way that we used to do things, you know, or talking about topics that really aren't relevant anymore. That's going to show, again, not so much your age, but that you're not relevant. And that's really what this presentation is about, is making sure that you're showcasing how you're relevant. And last, but certainly not least, is to focus on the future, both yours and that of the company, because that's where we're headed, right? We're all headed into the future. None of us can turn around and change anything in the past anyway. So let's focus on our own personal growth, our commitment to ongoing learning, our commitment to upskilling, and also what we want to do for the company or the organization and how we're going to work together to make that happen. Another quick couple things, then we're going to get to questions. If you get questions related to your age, sex, or other protected class, that's a red flag that that's not a company that's for you. If they flat out ask you how old you are, how is your health, when did you graduate, do you have a disability, they start asking about your family, oh, do you have any grandchildren, that's really none of their business. And so, you know, what I might say in a situation like that is, you know what, my family is really important to me, as I know family is important to everybody else. And I'm really excited to be here today to discuss how we're going to work together to achieve common objectives. And I just flip it around, because when people ask that question, they may not be trying to be ageist. They may be trying to establish rapport, and that's okay, but the focus is always going to be why you're there to do a good job for the organization. If they ask you how many sick days you were sick last year, you don't have to answer that. If they ask you about recent illnesses, again, that could be an ageist question. It could be something related to disability. I know in my last interview, and this was interesting because the woman who interviewed me was actually quite older than I was. And she said, well, someone with your tenure, we are, used to them maybe not being able to adapt as much. And that was a red flag to me. But my answer was, thank you for bringing that up. As someone who used to be a professor, I consider myself to be an ongoing learner. And as somebody who's certified through the National Career Development Association, I'm tasked with taking continuing education units every year. And so I feel quite comfortable that whatever I need to learn on this job, that's something I'm going to be able to master. And they hired me. So here's a big thing you have to do is you have to upskill. And this is true for everybody, including myself. When I started being a career coach, I wasn't certified, but I knew that was the first thing that I wanted to do, not only to have more credibility, but also to make sure that I knew the latest, the latest theories, the latest techniques and trends in career coaching. Intellectual growth should only cease at death. And that is a quote from Albert Einstein. I think we can agree that maybe he knows a little something about something. So I go with that quote. Question is, how do you upskill? A lot of people think, oh, I need to go get another college degree. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Certainly, if you want to be a physician, yeah, you're going to need to go and get a degree in order to do that. I know a teacher who left teaching. She went and got her medical degree and is now a psychiatrist. You can't take an online certificate in order to be a psychiatrist. However, many, many courses you can take through the public library simply by reading books and doing self-study. LinkedIn Learning and other online courses are great places to get certifications. Continuing education programs through community college systems and even some of the adult education systems through the public schools will have certifications that you can take. I know in San Diego, for example, Grossmont College offers a lot of micro certifications that can really help people not only to show that they're relevant, but quite frankly, get the knowledge that you need in order to be competitive. Apprenticeships are a big thing, and a lot of people don't think about these. You can actually get apprenticeships and earn money while you are upskilling. And that's another way, again, to show that you're relevant. I've even known people who were well beyond 50 who joined AmeriCorps because they wanted to learn something new. Now, did they make a killing in AmeriCorps at age 60? No, absolutely not. But what they did do is develop a whole new set of skills to be able to enter a new industry that brought them personal and professional satisfaction. Last thing I want to talk about are wage subsidy jobs and training programs. These are funded through the federal government. And if you go to your local career center, they're called America's Job Centers or Career One Stop. And again, you're going to get a link to that in the resources that I'm sending you. You can contact them and ask them, I'm interested in upskilling or I'm looking at new careers. Can you tell me about what federally funded training programs are available, or what sort of job programs do you have, that can help me to upskill? And they will tell you about those. Your tax is already paying for it. So if you're interested in finding out more, do. And here's the big thing. Get the micro badges and the certificates to verify your skill sets. That's going to be really important to put these on your resume, to put them on your LinkedIn profile, so that you can actually prove to people that you do have the skills versus just saying, hey, I took a class. Anyone, I can say that I took an Excel class. Am I any good in Excel? Absolutely not. But I definitely took the class, but I'm not able to actually demonstrate that I have those skills. One of the last things I want to talk about is looking at alternative work options. A lot of people think that in order to be in the workplace, they have to have a 9-to-5 job, and that's just absolutely not true. There's so many other options out there, no matter what your age is. You might be doing contract work, temporary work, adjunct work, consulting, freelancing, gig work. You might be looking at a government job or being a small business owner. Lisa North is one of my clients, and she was a private investigator. After age 50, she came to me, didn't know what else she wanted to do. She decided she wanted to be a baker. We outlined a plan for her in order to make that happen. And now she is so successful that she's come back to me asking for help on how to scale her business because she simply has too many clients. And so she was able to fulfill, her dreams, not by waiting for someone else to hire her, but by becoming her own employer. The advantage to doing this type of work is that it can get your foot in the door someplace. It can get you the skills and experience that you need to add to your resume in order to look for a full-time sort of 9-to-5 job if that's something that you want to do. But I would definitely look at all options if you're looking to advance in the workplace and not just be so focused on having a 9-to-5 job. Last but not least, you need to get help. None of us does this well on our own. There's many places to get help. Obviously, hiring a coach is one of those ways. Full disclosure, I was in my mid-40s when I wanted to change my own career. I had been out of the workforce for several years due to illness, and I had had many breaks in my career due to natural disasters and other things beyond my control. So I hired a career coach and I made an investment in myself, and it was one of the best things that I have ever done. But here's another idea. Get a younger mentor. We always think of mentors as being older and wiser. But if you want to know what's up to date, find someone who's 25 or 30 and have them to help you to navigate how things are working in the workforce these days. You can join a job club. And where do you find a job club? A job club is a group of job seekers who meet on a regular basis to network and support each other and give each other help. You can find those oftentimes at a library, through a nonprofit organization, and the America's Job Centers, they're going to have those as well. And that gets me to find a career center. A lot of people think career centers are located only on college campuses. But again, the career one-stops that I'm telling you about, and they're in that group of resources that I'm going to give you, there are career centers funded by the federal government all over the country. They offer free classes, and because of COVID, many of them are offering all of their services online. They can teach you how to do a resume, teach you about salary negotiation. They can teach you about interview skills. They'll even do mock interviewing for you in many cases. And here's the thing. If you're older and you have kids and grandkids, ask them for help. That's what they're there for. You've done so much for them throughout your life, but this is the time to ask them and say, hey, I'm doing these things right now. I'm looking to change my career, or I don't know how to use LinkedIn Learning, or I don't know how to use LinkedIn, or I don't know how to create an online portfolio. I guarantee that they have skills to do that. Just a few other things: access videos and tutorials to give you information about this sort of stuff, right? Get help. That doesn't always mean that you have to pay someone to do that. There are a tremendous amount of webinars like this one that are out there in cyberspace. I'm sending you again a link to a library that has videos on all of these topics that you can look up for yourself. And you definitely want to visit AARP for their resources. And again, I've already curated a lot of links to what ARP has to offer in terms of services and resources for mature workers. The last thing I'll say is the Senior Community Service Employment Program. That is one of those federally funded job training programs that I'm talking about. It is colloquially called CSEP, and it is a program where people are able to work in an organization, and the federal government pays for that. And during that process of being in that job, you're also getting trained on things like resume best practices and interview best practices. And the idea is that when you come out of that program, that you are ready to sort of go beyond subsidized employment. Again, I'm Marcia. While we are not done, we are just done with the presentation part of this. And we'll stop recording after the presentation, because when people ask questions, I want to make sure that they, feel free to do so without having their, personal information shared across cyberspace. But I thank you for attending today. I hope you've gotten even one thing out of this webinar, then I feel like it's been a success. And so we are going to stop recording at this time and move into our Q&A portion. I want to know what you're curious about. And if anyone is curious about this picture, these are real cats on my uncle's farm in Arkansas. And I always think about, cats being curious. And so if anyone knows me, they know that I love cats. And so I always like to put that picture at the end. So thank you very much. We're going to stop sharing and we are going to stop recording.